Attorney Harry, you haven't been seen publicly for the past couple of months, and then you suddenly resurfaced here at The Hague. Where have you been in the past months?
Unfortunately, I can't say, because if the CID, if the Commission on Immigration can't find me, I'm not going to make it any easier for them.
Okay, fair enough.
All I can say is sorry, but I can't say.
Okay, and why did you come to The Hague?
Well, because Vice President Sara said we should meet here and talk about the case. No? Well, I will say this much. I was supposed to be in Hong Kong, but very last minute, I could not go. And I do regret that decision, because what I would have told the former president was at least delay your departure home to the Philippines until such time that we had filed already pleadings that were already prepared a long time ago, no? Like a year before, no? To prevent his extradition. No? But I was not able to make it to the meeting, and of course he insisted on going home because he said he did not do anything wrong, and he even moved his flight earlier instead of later.
Former President Duterte's decision to move his flight earlier, was that because he was ready to be arrested, or from a legal standpoint, did he not see the arrest as something that was possible?
He could not fathom even the idea of being arrested, more so being transported to The Hague. He is so sure as a lawyer that the ICC has no jurisdiction that to him it was really a shock, especially the manner by which he was sent here, no? Which is patently illegal, contrary to the Rome Statute, and contrary to all expectations that he had.
For you as a lawyer and an accredited ICC lawyer, were you also shocked that he was arrested? No.
For the first time, I'm going to say, in fact, probably I was the only one advising the president to treat the ICC very, very seriously.
Why were you able to foresee that, or why did you foresee that?
Because the ICC needed to disprove what the Africans were complaining about. When I campaigned for the ILC, I was told by the African Union that they were really at the brink of, as an entire bloc, withdrawing from the ICC because they felt there was a bias against Africans, against black people, because the ICC was only investigating and trying people from Africa. So I guess to belie this, they needed to try someone else other than a black person, and that turned out to be Rodrigo Roa Duterte. No? So I knew that they were hell-bent on proving the Africans wrong, because if the Africans were to withdraw, that would be the end of the ICC, because the ICC would only have the Europeans and the Latin American countries as members. Certainly, we're far from universal ratification in Asia, and the major powers, including China, Russia, and the United States, are not part of the ICC Rome Statute.
I did notice when I was researching about existing ICC cases and those decided in the past that a huge chunk of it involved African leaders, heads of state. Why is it that it's African countries that have been tried and also receive decisions from the ICC?
I'm sorry to correct you, it's not a huge chunk. Only Africans, in fact, prior to President Duterte were tried and investigated. Of course,
okay, so you're more of the expert, so it's really just all
Africans are in court right now. No, of course, there are investigations against Putin, who is not black, but nothing will ever happen of that. Even if there's a warrant of arrest, there's no way they can surrender Putin.
What about
there's, of course, Netanyahu, no? But there's no way that Israel will at all surrender Netanyahu. No? In fact, the Americans have really gone out of their way to destroy the ICC precisely because of the warrant of arrest issued against Netanyahu. No? So I knew that as far as the court was concerned, it was an existential issue to have someone other than an African be brought to the court for trial.
But fundamentally, the arrest of former President Duterte would not have happened without the cooperation of the Philippine government, because the plane came from the Philippines. It was a Philippine-registered plane, from what we know of. And it was also a Filipino, General Torre, that led the arrest.
Again,
so did you foresee that as well, that the Philippine government would cooperate?
Again, state the fact. We did not have to cooperate. We volunteered because we arrested him even before the ICC requested for his arrest.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because normally a state party would, of course, ask the state to enforce the warrant of arrest, no? And this would be supported by a red notice alert from the Interpol as requested by the ICC. But there was no such request from the ICC to the Interpol
Wala bang
for
request?
assistance.
Because
None.
there was supposedly
there was a diffusion
an ICC
order.
Yes, okay.
There's a
So this is
diffusion
what that
order.
you're familiar with
Yes.
this. What is the difference between a diffusion order or diffusion notice and a red notice from the Interpol?
The diffusion notice came from the Philippines, requesting the international community for assistance to apprehend the former president. But how do you issue a diffusion notice to yourself? Because that's issued only by the Philippines.
Yeah.
And the difference with a red alert notice is the red alert notice is issued by the Interpol itself upon request of the ICC, and which means that it had to go through the General Secretariat, which should have taken steps to vet the legality of the warrant of arrest. And of course, it's important to vet the legality of the warrant of arrest because the service of the warrant is dictated by local law, no? Not by international law.
So under the Rome Statute, if the ICC warrant of arrest was being served, the requirement would have been to send someone to a competent judicial authority.
Well, in fact, that's a separate provision of the Rome Statute. I'm talking first about how the cooperation of a state party is triggered. It is, of course, by a formal request made, and I understand there was no formal request made yet, and with the assistance of Interpol, because Interpol will be the one to coordinate with the local police force, no? But there was no such request.
So how do you know that there was no request or notice? Because from our understanding, or even from my understanding when I was listening to the government's explanation, they were just merely cooperating with the Interpol. But it did come out during the Senate hearing that was led by Senator Amy Marcos that there was no red notice, there was only a diffusion notice. So how does that reconcile with what you're saying, that there was never a request from the ICC?
Because if the ICC requested for the arrest, they would have asked Interpol for assistance, okay? But Interpol never really intervened. What they had issued was a diffusion notice, which is a request from the Philippine government, not vetted by the Interpol, just a friendly request.
So it came from the Philippines?
It came from the Philippines and executed and enforced by the Philippines. It was like requesting oneself, no? Which is really ridiculous.
How do you know this, that the request came from the Philippines?
Because we've seen a copy of the diffusion notice, no? And of course, this came out also in the Senate hearing, no? So in a sense, the Senate hearing is very crucial to prove facts, which I knew even before the hearing was conducted, because someone who was from within the Philippine office charged with cooperating with Interpol had already sent me a copy of the diffusion notice.
So you had a copy?
I had a copy, but unfortunately I did not have to explain where it came from because it came out already in the Senate. Now, also under the Rome Statute, surrender to the court must comply with the requirement that it has to go through a process of extradition, which must be filed before a local court. And of course, in the Philippines, our procedure for extradition is dictated by an existing presidential decree, which has not yet been repealed or amended by Congress. And therefore, my expectation was he will still be brought first to a regional trial court. And I've said this over and over again in my columns and in my vlogs. No? So the manner by which he was arrested was completely a shock to me, because I thought that even an administration with an balanced mind would comply with the very reason that the ICC exists, which is the Rome Statute. No? And that's why, as I said, we were already ready with the petition a year before it actually happened to restrain cooperation, no? Because we thought we would have the time to question it, since they would still have to bring it to the local court. And in fact, under existing rules, as you know, in the rules of court, the issue of jurisdiction should be brought out in the extradition court itself, no? And then later on to the Supreme Court in case you do not agree with the judgment of the extradition court. But of course, the very process contained in the Rome Statute was not followed. And of course, it's a big lie that there's only a duty to cooperate with Interpol because there's none. Even if there was a red notice alert, it's not an international warrant of arrest. And of course, compliance with it would still depend with the local laws. And the local law says we cannot send him to the requesting court unless and until he faces an extradition court.
Okay. I seem to have remember that I think it was the Secretary of Justice which said that there
Correct.
are two options, extradition or voluntary cooperation. He seems to be making a distinction there. But
No.
legally, the only option is extradition.
Yes, because what he meant by voluntary cooperation is voluntary surrender of the accused.
Yes.
But why is there a provision in the Rome Statute which requires an extradition process? It is to obviate the criticism arising from the decision of the Israeli Supreme Court on Eichmann. Eichmann, of course, 25 years after Second World War, was a high-ranking official of the Nazi government. He was found living under an assumed identity in Argentina, and the Mossad simply sent agents, drugged him, put him in a private plane, and brought him to Israel to stand trial. Drugged him.
Oh my goodness.
Okay? And of course, Argentina complained that their sovereignty was violated because foreign agents operated in their soil, and the defense raised the issue of illegality of the arrest, and they wanted the Israeli courts to divest itself of jurisdiction, which is legally termed decoupling of jurisdiction. And Israeli Supreme Court said, I'm sorry, it's main pa. Malay namin, pakialam namin paano nakuha yan. What's important is it's given a fair and impartial trial. Now, to obviate the fact that obtaining the person of the accused through an illegal means is no longer sanctioned under modern human rights standards, that's the reason why they want and require all states cooperating with the court to first bring the accused before a local court to make sure that his rights are protected. And of course, one of the rights that he has is to question the jurisdiction of the court requesting his extradition. In the same way that you could oppose a request for extradition if you're going to be subjected to the death penalty or to torture, because there's also prohibition against extradition to places, particularly where you are liable for torture. But the president was deprived of such right.
So given that there were, as you said, deprivation of some rights, including rights that were supposed to be granted under the Rome Statute, do you think there's strength to the case of former President Duterte in terms of questioning all of this, even at the confirmation hearing?
Well, if I had my way, I would even wait for confirmation of hearing.
There's a way to question this
yes,
before September?
Jurisdiction can be raised at any time. If there's a way, and if I were already part of the legal team, I would have done it differently, But, let Kaufman deal with that. But I wouldn't have followed this route. And what's important to reiterate now is that a confirmation hearing primarily is for the court to be satisfied that there's not just reasonable evidence required for the issuance of the warrant of arrest, but that there's now probable cause to continue to trial. So you could raise jurisdiction there, but there's no prohibition in raising the issue of jurisdiction even before confirmation, because obviously it's 6 months from now. So I think while the odds are stacked against the president, because there are 3 precedents in the ICC where the court said the manner by which jurisdiction was acquired over the person of the accused does not matter. And this is also the view of the lone Filipino judge who served at the ICC.
Yes, I interviewed Judge Raul Pangalangan.
I saw that interview. Yes. He says the manner by which jurisdiction over the person will not really matter. I don't agree with that. Because just because it has been the practice not to scrutinize the legality of the manner by which acquisition over the person of the accused was acquired does not make it right. You are a court that is promoting international justice, and how do you promote international justice when you do not resort to lawful means in acquiring jurisdiction in the first place over the person of the accused? To me, it's a contradiction in terms.
Okay, so there might still be some remedy in the ICC.
Well, I would hope so, but if we go by the decisions of the ICC right now, 3 times in at least 3 cases, Bamba and 2 other cases, they made an issue over the fact that there was no compliance with resort to the local courts first, and the court just went ahead and tried the case on the merit.
Okay. What about resorting to Philippine courts? Is there any hope there?
Well,
the petition for certiorari, prohibition, it's now pending in the Supreme Court.
Well, I'm a bit hesitant to answer because I'm counsel for Pulong. And I filed a petition for habeas corpus coupled with certiorari.
So you're the counsel for Pulong,
Congressman Pulong
for Congressman Paulo Duterte in the Supreme Court. So among those petitions that are filed, you're one of the counsels.
In fact, we're the only ones that filed habeas corpus and certiorari. Why? Well, we had the certiorari prepared as of December of 2023. But of course, there were blanks because we did not know when the warrant of arrest would be issued.
So you were that prepared.
We were that prepared, okay?
But you didn't have time to file this because former President Duterte was held in the Hague, in the Villamor Air Base for a couple of hours before he was
we didn't have enough to rewrite the petition to include habeas corpus. I've always maintained that we cannot just file a habeas corpus petition because the only issue is legality of the arrest, and all they're going to say is that here is an ICC arrest warrant. Even if we're saying because we're no longer a member of the court, that arrest warrant does not matter anymore, no? And what will prevail will be the 1987 Constitution. No? But the issue of cooperation needed to be questioned through certiorari, because it's grave abuse of discretion in the first place to cooperate where there is no more duty to cooperate. So of the pending petitions, we're the only ones that combined habeas corpus with certiorari. And we were delayed because we did not expect that he would be apprehended and immediately brought to Villamor.
And that there was a private plane waiting.
We were already ready by the time he was put on that private plane, except that the Supreme Court was already closed because the filing of the Supreme Court was at 4:30. Remember, he arrived roughly around 11.
Yes.
And then
they flew him out, I think, early evening.
And also, we had a problem with where is he so he could sign his verification and affidavit of non-forum shopping. No?
Challenge.
That was another challenge. No, our messenger could not even enter Villamor because Vice President Sara Duterte could not also enter the premises, no? And so the rest is history.
Do you think that this was also anticipated by the government, that you already had a prepared petition and that you guys were ready to question it in court?
That's why they did not waste time in putting him in a private jet and bringing him as soon as possible to The Hague, because they wanted to avoid judicial review. Now, fortunately, because ours is coupled with certiorari, it does not mean that just because the person on whose behalf the petition is filed is beyond Philippine jurisdiction, that the court cannot rule on the legality of what happened. That's really the office of a certiorari. No?
So you believe, as a lawyer, that there's still some remedy left in the Supreme Court of the Philippines?
Well, they haven't dismissed my certiorari when they could easily dismiss all the habeas corpus. And the reason why the habeas corpus petitions have not been dismissed is they were consolidated in one case. Now, that ruling will be very important because according to the Rome Statute itself, the legality on the issue of how the arrest warrant was served will be determined by local law. And the decision of the Supreme Court, Philippine Supreme Court, although not binding on the ICC, would of course have a lot of weight because in the first place, it is the Philippine justices who know what Philippine law is all about.
Would that indicate that the judicial system in the Philippines is working, which would then trigger the application of the complementarity doctrine?
I think we need to find a way when there are very urgent cases, there should at least be one magistrate that can issue immediately a TRO. Now, in our system, the Chief Justice has the power to issue a TRO on his own.
By himself,
which is a TRO good for 72 hours.
Okay.
I just do not know what happened. I just do not know if he even knew that there was already one certiorari petition filed. The Supreme Court no longer accepts petitions by 4:30. It was filed by 4:27, the one filed by Attorney Del Grano, which is a petition from the President himself and Senator Bato. No? So it was filed 4:27 and the closing is at 4:30. There was an opportunity for the Chief Justice to issue a TRO.
But you don't know what happened.
I don't know what happened, and I don't know if there was enough time. Because remember, it was filed 4:27, and they took off around, I think, shortly after 5 or 6, if I'm not mistaken. No? So there probably really was no time because unless, you know, a soft copy was sent to the Chief Justice and he could dictate over the phone the issuance of a 72-hour TRO.
But legally, a lot of people ask me this as a lawyer. Even now, I'm at the Hague. When I would go to the detention center, I would have people there asking me, Attorney, may pag-asa pa bang maibalik si PRRD? Palagay mo, pwede pa bang iuwi si Tatay Digong? Kaya ba ng Supreme Court natin? So, legally, can they reverse that?
The Supreme Court cannot order the ICC.
But can they order the government
well,
and then ask the government?
No, they cannot, of course. But they can order the government. Of course, the habeas corpus, I think, has become moot, but not the certiorari. Okay? Because, well, you know, let me explain. The habeas corpus will merely require them to present the person on whose behalf the petition is filed. So how can they present the person when he's no longer in the Philippines? No?
Yeah.
Of course, they can still rule that, yes, you have to present them, and then the people who are not able to present him could have liability, no? Administrative or criminal, but that's water under the bridge. Now, the certiorari at least will give us clarity on whether or not the procedure under the Rome Statute itself was complied with, no, for future reference.
And that could be used in the ICC?
And it can be used now in the ICC because the ICC cannot close its eyes to what local law says about the issue of enforcing the arrest warrant of the court because it's made dependent on local laws.
Very interesting, Attorney Harry. Well, can you take us back just very briefly, because now I'm so curious, on the day that former President Duterte was arrested, you were here at The Hague or somewhere
No,
else?
I was in my sanctuary
yes.
then,
And
but I was
the time
watching it live.
But the time difference for you, were you...
No substantial time difference.
They were reaching out to you.
No.
Like they were already, someone from the family was already calling you, because I understand you were part of that petition that was prepared
ahead of time, a year before.
2023,
Yes.
yeah. So you could have been one of the people that was called right away.
Well, my regret really is, number one, I was not in the Philippines. Because and then number two, I did not attend that meeting. Because really, had I been in that meeting, I would really put a handcuff on the president on the table and say, wait 3 days.
Okay,
because that's all I wanted, 3 days. Because I could not fathom how the court would not issue a TRO, given that the issue is, what, are we going to set aside the provision of the Constitution that judicial power rests only in one Supreme Court and all other courts created by law, by cooperating with the court, established pursuant to a treaty, which provides for our right to withdraw, and which provides for until when the cooperation, the duty to cooperate, subsists after withdrawal, which is 1 year after instrument of ratification. More importantly, I could not imagine the court ruling that Philippine courts are unable and unwilling to exercise jurisdiction over this case, given that we have our own domestic law implementing the exact same crimes being penalized by the ICC. So on that ground alone, I'm sorry, normally lawyers will never give a prognosis. No? I gave him 100%. The Supreme Court will issue a restraining order because the Supreme Court will never say that the Philippine courts are unable and unwilling
to act,
to prosecute, you know. Forget it. They might as well abolish themselves if they will concur with that conclusion. No? So I was so sure that if the petition was filed, well, if they did not rush his kidnapping to the Hague, that the Supreme Court could have intervened. I'm so sure of it.
Now that that is already fait accompli, what can Filipinos expect? Should we wait for September, or will there be something going on in between?
Again, I'm not part of the legal battle. Okay? But I do not know if I can speak as a member of the
But
Peace
based
Council.
on your knowledge, because you are one
okay,
of the few
okay.
Filipinos that's an ICC accredited lawyer.
I'm not part of the legal team. Everyone knows that. If I had my way, as soon as he got to the Hague, I would already have a motion to dismiss. I would not even bother with provisional release. Why? There's not been an instance when someone accused of the core crimes of the Rome Statute was given provisional release. The only people given provisional release were those accused of offenses relating to administration of justice, falsification of testimony, destruction of evidence, threatening witnesses. No? But the accused themselves of the core crime, look at the court record, denied. And I will not wait for anything else. File that motion right away to dismiss on the basis of lack of jurisdiction, not only because of the manner of the arrest, but also because of the fact that we withdrew already and they started the preliminary investigation after 1 year. In fact, we were so ready that we already had a volunteer.
Volunteer for?
Volunteer in case the warrant or arrest warrant was to be issued. One police officer already volunteered. He will voluntarily surrender to the ICC to get right away a ruling on jurisdiction. That's how ready we were.
You mean someone that
who will be issued also a warrant of arrest will volunteer and appear at The Hague in exchange for provisional release, and just so we could challenge already the issue of jurisdiction.
But I'm a bit confused. Who could that be? You mean to say that someone that would also be subject to this
warrant of arrest, yes.
Same complaint on crimes against humanity?
There were 5
along with former President
police
Duterte.
officers invited by the ICC prosecution to meet and have a conference. Obviously, all 5 of them will subsequently, maybe very, very soon, be issued warrants of arrest. So one of them already volunteered that should the warrant of arrest be issued, and of course we thought that there would be recourse to local courts and we could raise the issue before local courts, he will come to The Hague, surrender, so that we could raise the issue of jurisdiction as soon as possible.
So like
how ready we were.
That would be like a test case.
Yes, because it redounds to the benefit of everyone, including the former president.
Well,
there's no jurisdiction over one of them because of the subject matter. Then there would be no jurisdiction as to everyone.
Would they allow that, a motion to dismiss prior to the confirmation hearing? I'm not familiar with the ICC rules.
There's no prohibition.
Comparing to the rules of court.
There's no prohibition. In fact, provisional release, of course, comes before the confirmation hearing. You see, the background of confirmation hearing is it's just to persuade the U.S. to join. Because the U.S., one of the fears that they had was the prosecutor was so powerful, he could charge sitting presidents, and yet he himself has no sense of accountability because unlike in the U.S., the prosecutor is not elected by the people, whereas the attorney generals in the different states are elected by the people. No? So in order to convince them, they said, okay, we'll come up with a pretrial chamber that would validate everything and anything that the prosecutor does. No? And if you look at the Rome Statute itself, confirmation hearing is to test if there's probable cause.
Yeah, it's kind of...
You could also allege jurisdiction, but there's no prohibition on alleging lack of jurisdiction ahead of the confirmation of the confirmation hearing.
Okay, so ICC is really what I would call sui generis because it's so different from the way we do it in the Philippines, meaning by the time you go to when I look at the procedure, it's almost similar to a pre-trial, but then in this case, you can still question jurisdiction at the confirmation hearing. And
that's just a confirmation hearing. I don't think you have to wait 6 months to do it. Because meanwhile, what do you do? If the court has no jurisdiction, you would have lost 6 months of your life.
Yeah, that's true.
I would have argued otherwise.
Considering that you are one of the few ICC accredited lawyers from the Philippines, what would have been the advantage, if any, for you to be part of the legal team of former President Duterte?
I don't think I should comment, no? It's not proper for me to comment, especially since the issue on who will be the Filipino counsel has not yet been decided upon.
So there's a slot for a Filipino counsel?
Now they're saying there's a slot. Remember, in the beginning, Vice President Sara said they're all foreign. But how do you employ all foreign, knowing fully well that the entire prosecution is politically motivated?
What do you mean politically motivated?
Well, there's no such thing as evidence for evidence sake. The evidence was gathered for a specific purpose, which was in the form of a political vendetta against the president, no? The former president. No? And therefore, you need to appreciate the context by which this evidence were gathered and presented to the prosecutor. No? So, take for instance Leila de Lima. No? How do you treat Leila de Lima as a possible witness? She will say, yes, there's a Davao Death Squad. Yes, it was President Duterte that ordered the Davao Death Squad. The question is, Madam Leila de Lima, weren't you chairman of the Commission on Human Rights? Weren't you Secretary of the Department of Justice? Did you not have 6 years? And you exactly had all the legal basis and instruments by which to file charges against the former president, and you did not do so, even if you were in office for 6 long years. No?
So that's the context that you're talking about.
That's the context I'm saying, no?
Yeah,
and then, of course, this Matabato, no? I'm sure Matabato will be one of them, no? He says that he buried people in a mass grave. Do you know that in connection with the Maguindanao massacre case, we also we undertook a dig using a foreign anthropological expert that had experience with the former Yugoslavia tribunal? We did a dig and found only remains of dogs. So, in the spot that Matabato said was where he buried.
Oh, okay. So now you're talking about the credibility of that witness with respect to past incidents in the Philippines.
But would the foreign lawyer know about that? And of course, you know, the Las Cañas. Oh, how do you explain the fact that Las Cañas was already cited in contempt by the Senate for lying? For saying well, no, Las Cañas is for a different case. That's for Pulong, no? That's for the supposed wholesale drug trafficking, no? But, you know,
so how those things, like meaning events in the past that happened in the Philippines would provide context to properly defend.
Another example would be the 2 convicted felons in the Davao Penal Colony that was supposedly praised by Duterte when they killed Chinese drug traffickers. What is the context that I'm talking about? The context now is that they were brought out of Muntinlupa and are now enjoying a good life in the detention facility at the house, being given catered food. And God knows if their liberty is restricted at all, no? So it's that kind of context that will not be appreciated by foreign lawyers.
Are you saying that they were these 2 people, were they police officers, like they were transferred to Congress only under the current administration?
Yes, even against existing Supreme Court policies, because I do not know if they actually got a Supreme Court approval. You cannot move a convicted felon from Muntinlupa elsewhere without a resolution from the court. I do not know if they complied with, but of course in the Philippines, if you have a signature of the speaker, you'll just do it, no? And won't be a hindrance.
Yeah. Well, Attorney Harry, from my end, the reason I asked if there would be an advantage to having you or another Filipino counsel is that, of course, with respect to communicating, for former President Duterte, if it were all foreign lawyers, he can't even speak Tagalog, or is that like an issue then in preparing for his defense?
One of my regrets is I've been here since day one the president was. And one of my really big regrets is since 2018, I've been advising him on the ICC. Of course, he did not take me seriously enough. And for the first time, I'm saying it. None of the other people around him really considered me seriously. They thought I was dreaming.
Because they really did not anticipate that the ICC
could
have jurisdiction.
It was not something that they could even fathom, because when they were in law school, it was unthinkable to have an ICC to begin with. Okay? Well, at least one of them has already apologized to me and said, we should have taken you more seriously. And, but one of my regrets with not being able to advise the president now is I could imagine he's very confused, because what he knows is Philippine law. And he cannot fathom, for instance, how could I be in jail now, not even knowing what the evidence is against me? Because in the Philippines, before an information is filed in court, you go through preliminary investigation.
Exactly. That's why I was telling you earlier.
You have to produce all the evidence ahead of time. So you go to court knowing already what you need to rebut, no? of course, he cannot appreciate that, especially since he was a former prosecutor, you know. And then, what is this pretrial chamber, you know? The pretrial chamber that will only have a confirmation hearing to confirm this probable cause, no?
Yeah, exactly.
How
That's
do
why
you
I was saying
explain
it's a
that,
bit
no?
weird because for
Oh.
us, if you're used to Philippine law, if you already are indicted, in which case, in this case,
Yeah.
the president is already being detained, that would mean that probable cause had already been determined.
Yes.
So in this case, parang reverse
Wala,
na kulong
because
ka
it's
na,
only
pero wala
reasonable,
pang...
reasonable grounds to believe. That's the basis for the warrant of arrest. And of course, if you do not know the system in the ICC, you would feel there is an injustice precisely because you were arrested even without probable cause, because you were arrested only on the basis of reasonable grounds. No? So anyway,
Yeah, have
I
you
tried my best.
Have you tried to
I
visit
tried,
the
but the
president?
decision to visit is dependent now on Mr. Kaufman.
Attorney Harry Roque and his personal relationship with VP Sara Duterte is up next when At the Forefront returns after a short break.
Good evening, I'm Pinky Webb.
The questions.
What did you uncover?
Kita natin yung sa IPO, there was a violation of Section 8 of Republic Act 9511.
The issues.
Is there a problem with that, the present setup of the syntax?
The reason there's a 5% increase is because of inflation.
We clarify matters.
All these government agencies were actually at the lowest. That's why it has to be, I hope that it will be addressed.
Pinky Webb is always on point.
Welcome back at the Forefront. Attorney Harry Roque expresses his what-ifs on the ICC case. Here's the second part of Attorney Karen Jimenez's interview with Harry Roque.
You're not allowed to visit in your personal capacity. Have you tried to apply?
I applied every day. But Mr. Kaufman, when he was appointed, requested the registry that no potential client, no potential counsel could visit without his consent, and he's not given his consent for me to visit.
What about visiting as a friend? Is that even allowed under ICC rules? I know that they have like a
under
hierarchy.
ICC rules, yes, but I'm not aware of any friend having been allowed to visit because Senator Robin Padilla came and went without seeing him. The best way to see him is as counsel or as a probable counsel, but as a probable counsel, I need the consent of Mr. Kaufman, and he hasn't given his consent, and you cannot be counsel unless he signs your engagement as counsel. The president,
What would
that is.
have been your message to former President Duterte if you were able to visit him?
Well, number one, I would have explained the differences between the ICC procedure and Philippine law, because I am so sure of it. As a former prosecutor, he is all confused why these things are happening. Number two, I would have told him that a commonality, though, is that the warrant of arrest must have been served lawfully in order that the court can prosecute the case, no? Because, you know, we also have the same ruling in the Philippines. Well, we don't have, but if you're arrested without warrant, and it turns out that it is not one of those allowed under warrantless arrest, you know that the court cannot have jurisdiction over your person, correct? But it's completely different. The fact that you were only arrested on the basis of reasonable basis. No? So that would have been something that I would have explained to him. And I would have explained to him that it's important that we have the case dismissed on the basis of jurisdiction, because the elements of crime are still in the process of being not really defined. It's defined by the Rome Statute, but we are still in the basis of getting clarity, particularly on crimes against humanity. No? So it's important to have it dismissed as early as possible on the basis of jurisdiction and not have to go through a trial on the merits.
What type of cases in the ICC have you held or handled in the past?
Only one. And I did not really disclose this publicly, but it was reported in the media. I was hired by the government of Ukraine to help the victims in their submission against President Putin.
What was the allegation there?
Kidnapping of children.
Oh, okay. Crimes against humanity, compared to other ICC cases, is this along the same league of crimes against humanity? I think for Filipinos, again, because we're not really familiar with the ICC, I've had people asking me, Attorney, crimes against humanity ba talaga yung ginawa ni President Duterte? Because the past ICC cases, there were one I read had pillaging, rape, and torture. So
you need to prove that there's an attack against civilian populations, knowing it was directed against the civilian population. Okay, knowledge it was being directed against civilian populations, and you only prove either it is widespread or systematic. Now, the problem with this case is that I was surprised to read in the warrant of arrest that they were talking of at least 43
in
deaths.
a span of
About 4 years.
Is it 4? I thought I read 8 years.
Or 8 years,
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
So you're talking of 43 over 8. I'm not saying that 43 is not heinous because one is heinous already. But that's why you have cases to be tried by domestic courts and cases to be tried by the International Criminal Court, because ICC is reserved as a last resort for the most heinous crimes against the international community.
And also the word complementarity means they complement the
And they only
local
complement
courts.
local courts.
They don't supplant
Yes.
it.
And my point is, we convicted the Ampatuans for 58 counts of murder. So why are we in the ICC for 43 counts of murder? It took us 10 years, but at least we convicted them. And, Bamba trial lasted 8 years. So Philippine courts are not too slow compared to the ICC, considering that Bamba, I don't know how many victims there were, how many were in fact alleged. But Philippine courts are not that bad. If we are going to use the Maguindanao Massacre case as an example.
Does the ICC also take judicial notice, similar to courts in the Philippines? Meaning, if they look at the sequence of events where in the past you've had former Senator Laila de Lima, when she was still Commission on Human Rights, I think initiated already investigations when former President Duterte was still mayor, and then up until recently there were Quadcom hearings that were investigating supposedly the extrajudicial killings and anti-drug war. Do they take judicial notice of that to see that there's a functioning judicial system eventually when they try the case? Does that still matter when it comes to determining jurisdiction?
But it's not an issue of whether or not we have a functioning legal system. I think when you talk of complementarity, we're talking about the ability actually, not the unwillingness. And this was addressed when the issue of the preliminary investigation was commenced, and we made the submission as a state, as a state party to the ICC, that Philippine courts can very well investigate, and we cited the case of Kian, etc. But what's important is you need to define with more clarity what is widespread, because systematic has an accepted definition already. Okay? But what is widespread?
What is systematic? What is the accepted definition of systematic?
Well, systematic it forms part of a system, it forms part of an overall plan. Okay?
So in this case,
I don't think they're alleging systematic. I think they're alleging widespread because of the numbers, because they were talking of 30,000. Okay?
But you say drug war campaign, isn't that considered systematic, or you have to prove something similar to, for example, the Holocaust, where there was really like a system where they bring people to a certain facility?
Yes, that's why, first
them,
they were Jews, and they were gathered in concentration camps, and they were singled out.
So that's more systematic.
That's the system that you're talking about. Now, but, again, I reiterate, when you have 43 and we have successfully prosecuted in the RTC of Quezon City 58 counts of murder, shouldn't the Philippine courts be trying this instead of the ICC?
Well, let's go to your decision to come here. Weren't you worried that you were taking a risk by surfacing here in The Hague? Because prior to this, the attention on you has died down. And then it was only when former President Duterte was brought here to The Hague that you resurfaced. Why did you take that risk?
Because I knew I had to assist the president. To begin with, we had prepared already a petition, which we could not file, but all our allegations and statements in that petition could very well be made before the ICC. The fact especially that the court had already lost jurisdiction, no, because of the time when the preliminary investigation was started. I owe it to my boss to defend him after having warned him that it could happen. And moreover, the Vice President and I agreed, let's talk about this at the Hague.
Are you close to Vice President Sara or the former president? Do you consider them as friends, not just
No,
former
I will
president?
never consider them as friends because I always defer to them. No? But Vice President Sara was the one who sat down with me and talked about the ICC case and prepared the petition. It was commissioned by Vice President Sara Duterte, in fact.
Years ago.
A year ago, no, or in 2023 of December. No? So we had it ready by January of 2024.
So Vice President Sara also took it seriously?
She was the only one who took it seriously. Unfortunately, no other person in the cabinet took me seriously.
Even the lawyers, Executive Secretary
no
Miguel
one,
Bea,
no one took me
Secretary
seriously. I don't want to name names.
Okay, sige.
It's
I'm gonna
only
put you
Sara
in that spot.
Duterte who sat down with me and commissioned me to actually write a certiorari petition in case an arrest warrant would be issued. Of course, she's a daughter. And to me, that
And
was
also
to be
a lawyer.
expected.
Attorney Harry Roque talks about his bid for asylum when At the Forefront returns after a short break.
Hello and welcome to Follow the Money. I'm Ib1Nunyag. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey.
We empower.
This country deserves a real choice in the next election.
We motivate.
Do not invest money that you're not able to afford to lose.
Changes that are vital.
We're monitoring the sale of these products online.
Follow the Money with Ib1Nunyag.
Keep it here on the Billionaire News Channel. Always on top.
Welcome back at the Forefront. Attorney Harry Roque talks about his personal plans and frustration with Attorney Karen. Let's watch this.
What came first, your decision to come here and help defend President Duterte, or your decision to seek asylum?
Of course, the decision to come here. The decision to seek asylum was an afterthought because one of my classmates in law school, hello, classmate, announced we should really revoke his passport so he can no longer travel.
About you? Sinabi
About
ng
me.
one of your
Sinabi niya
classmates
yan,
about
no,
you.
sinabi niya hello, and I couldn't believe my own classmate said that. No? But in any case, that's when I said, it's time to get asylum. And, there's always like politicking whenever you talk about a political person. And that was one of the issues raised against me. How can I defend the president when I don't have tenure in my stay in the Netherlands? And I knew that it could simply be resolved by filing for asylum, because it is the filing of asylum that gives me the right to non-refoulement, and that the approval will only give me the option for permanent residence or citizenship, which, we're hoping may not be necessary, because we're hoping for changes in the Philippines soon.
You're hoping for a change in the Philippines. Well, in the upcoming elections, do you think something can change, like with the midterm elections?
I'm not optimistic that the midterm elections will change anything. If at all, I think the midterm elections would be a validation of the Marcos rule.
You think it's a validation?
Of the Marcos rule, because I don't see the opposition winning majority of the seats in the Senate to begin with. I mean, let's face it, it takes so much money to win, and regardless of what's happening, you just inundate the airwaves with fancy commercials and you could end up winning, no? Or the fact that you already have a trade name out there, no? For being a senator. No? So I'm not too optimistic that things will change for the better after the elections.
Well, there are reports of an online petition opposing your asylum application, and supposedly lawmakers also from the Makabayan bloc are intending to write the Dutch parliament to oppose your application. Are you worried about this?
Not at all.
Why?
Well, number one, that would prove that there are people who hate me enough, and that many of them are in government right now. So they're doing me a favor.
What about this Philippine-born Dutch citizen, Joel Vega? He supposedly also launched a signature drive to oppose your application. Do you know him personally?
No, and fortunately, as a long-time professor of international law, Joel, wherever you are, the decision to grant an asylum is not subject to voting.
Wala akong admiring kung mga opposition. I thought there was like a process where if you get opposed.
Nothing. It's whether or not I can prove political persecution. All I have to do is to show how they conducted the hearings in the Quad Committee.
Okay. What about a potential change in the laws in Netherlands? Just this March 2025, the Dutch cabinet approved a submission for an asylum reform package to the House of Representatives, and this is supposed to contain stricter asylum laws.
Doesn't bother me because, as I said, what's important to me now is the right to non-refoulement, which I already have. And an average time now to process an asylum application is 1.5 years, but it could take longer. So meanwhile that it's pending, I have a guarantee that I cannot be deported back to the Philippines.
Do you really believe that you're being politically persecuted?
Yes. I was the first. I don't understand why. Well, I do know why.
Why?
Because the Marcos administration is blaming me for the Pulveron video.
Do you have anything to do with that?
I have nothing to do with it, but, you know, they're so sure I was behind it, no? I came from Congress. I know these buffoons. I know who all of them. And they, of course, told me that the reason why they really went after me is because of the Pulveron video, no, which to me adds credence to the video, because if it's not true, why are they really so pissed at me, supposedly, for obtaining it and disseminating it? No? So, yes, come on. Need I tell you what I underwent in the Philippines under the hands of those buffoons in Congress?
Well,
anyone who watches the proceedings will know, including the 3 times when I appeared and participated for 10 hours each time, and the subsequent hearings. No? What do you call that if not political persecution?
Well, it is also some members of Congress who are now saying that you should go home and face the arrest order that Congress issued against you.
Why
what can
should
you say
I?
About that arrest order?
Why should I? And I'm talking to my former colleagues. You know very well the meats and scope of what is covered by legislative investigation. Kung hindi, ang bobobo nyo at hopeless na kayo. Dahil paulit-ulit na yan sinasabi ng Korte, Bengzon, and the latest case, of course, is the Farmally case,
yes.
Lincoln Ong.
Yeah.
Oh, it must have a relevance to the matter being investigated upon in aid of legislation. I don't see any relevance how, for instance, the extrajudicial estate settlement of my spinster aunt, who happened to be a judge, a former judge, is relevant to the proceedings. What is the relation of my Salen to Pogo? Correct? Mm-hmm. I don't understand. There were insinuations that I had unexplained wealth because I had a sudden increase in wealth. I said I sold land, 3 hectares at that, at the height of, at the center of Parañaque, which could easily be verified through the Land Registration Authority.
So you didn't sell any land?
Well, I did sell.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is they have a record there.
Oh, okay.
You know, this is a matter of public record.
Yeah.
So what do
so
they?
You're saying that there's no controversy
there's
there.
no controversy there, no? So to me, why should I appear there? I mean, they wanted to do to me what they're now doing to the vloggers, which is to embarrass me to death before the whole world, supposedly for my unexplained wealth. But the 3 times I was there, I answered all questions that they had on my possible involvement in Pogo, and they have not proven anything.
Well,
so what is there to face?
19th Congress has already adjourned. Meron pa bang bisa yung arrest order?
Unfortunately, the arrest order will subsist until June 30, when the 19th Congress completely adjourns.
Okay. So after that, then wala na talagang arrest order.
Wala na.
And with respect to cases you mentioned, they subjected you to these hearings pero wala naman silang nakita. The Prosecutor General, Richard Fadulon, said recently that a resolution by the Department of Justice will come out around next month. Do you have any idea what that resolution would say?
I'm confident because, number one, the case against me was a belated filing. It was through a supplemental complaint.
This
I
is
was
the
not-
complaint
yes,
for human trafficking.
Number two, there's not a single allegation that I trafficked anyone. The elements being you recruited, you transported, you took advantage of their labor, and there's no allegation as to conspiracy either. All that they had was I accompanied Cassandra Ong to PAGCOR, that there was a piece of paper saying I'm legal, doesn't even say that I'm an officer, and of course that a staff member resided in that place. Now, where's the conspiracy there? I'm so confident.
You're confident that
I'm so
the resolution
confident
will be a dismissal?
That it will be a dismissal, especially now that they have even increased the threshold of evidence from probable cause to reasonable grounds of conviction. And that's the best evidence for the persecution, because you just have to read what the complaint affidavit says and what the resolution will say. Because what the complaint affidavit lacks is even allegations,
Wala.
that I
You've
participated.
Seen the
Yes, of course, I answered. I filed my counter affidavit. That's why I surfaced in Dubai. No? So there's not even an allegation that I did any of the elements of trafficking or that there is any form of conspiracy at all. And remember, the rule is you need to prove the elements of the crime and the conspiracy separately. Not only now using probable cause as basis, but reasonable certainty of conviction.
So, should this DOJ resolution be against you, saying that charges should be filed against you, do you think that would strengthen your case for political persecution to grant you asylum?
Again, that would make it an absolute certainty. Because at the basis of that supplemental complaint affidavit, there's absolutely not even allegations in it of a conspiracy, more so that I committed any of the elements of the crime.
Should you be denied asylum in the end, let's just hypothetically, are you ready to go back to the Philippines?
What choice do I have? That's the consequence. If your asylum is denied, then you can be extradited back.
It's going to be an extradition from here.
They will deport you.
That's part of the application.
They will deport you.
Okay, so you really took a risk then by applying for asylum instead of, just hiding in another country. If you apply for asylum, then...
I was sick and tired of hiding. I wanted to go to a place where I could have the right of an asylum seeker, because I've been to places who are not parties to the 1951 Convention on the Rights of Refugees and Asylum Seekers, which is why you really had to hide. But at least now, because they are a convention party, I can surface and not worry about deportation for as long as application is pending.
What about your family? Do you miss them?
Of course I miss them. What a question.
Oo nga eh. But
Come on,
syempre naman,
do you really need
it's
to
an
ask?
obvious, yeah. So, but how do you manage that?
It's very painful. I will never forgive the Marcos family for the damage that they have done to us. Never.
And your kids
And I
miss
regret
you.
the fact that we forgave this family the first time around. They should never be forgiven.
Well, Attorney Harry, good luck with your asylum application, and thank you for sharing your knowledge of the ICC. Well, we hope to see you again soon,
Yes.
perhaps under better terms in the Philippines.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Para sa karagdagang impormasyon, ay huwag po nating kalimutang mag-subscribe sa channel na ito, at i-share lamang po ang video na iyong napanood. Maraming salamat po sa patuloy na pagtangkilik kay Senyora Buzz.